What a beautiful setting. Thanks to WWD for organizing this and also for remaining relevant through all these years of having been in fashion and beauty. It's fun to see how WWD remains sort of such a critical source for our industry. So shout out. So I decided I'm at a transition in my own career, and I thought as I stepped back and thought about what was happening in the industry, it might be most interesting to this group, which is a mix of small and big company people, to talk a little bit about my experience over the years and what I have learned having moved from a series of large companies to a startup, because it's been a really great career experience, and there are definitely some trends that have, I would say, we're seeing overall, but are really useful data points for those in bigger companies or even companies that were established more than 10 years ago. So I wanted to start by giving you a very brief background on where I've been and what I've done, and then dig into some of these, and then at the end we'll open it up for a couple questions. So I started my career at Donna Karan, actually out of college, working in merchandising, and then did investment banking briefly and went to Starbucks in the late 90s and worked on sort of lifestyle categories and M&A work for them, and watched from sort of 1996 when the first book was sold on Amazon.com, and was kind of obsessed with the idea that this opens up a whole world of shopping for fashion. I'd spent my weekends growing up in the mall and always found that there were things I wanted that I couldn't find, and this seemed like the huge opportunity to suddenly allow consumers to be able to be in control of what they're shopping for. And so I joined Nordstrom at the very beginning of 2000, and I was there for 5 years, and had the lucky opportunity to help build their e-commerce business kind of from scratch. And at that time, we were a separate division, really spun out with venture investors, because it was the time when those it was thought that there could be a separate company spun out and go public. So we were sort of Nordstrom.com with venture investors. Eventually, everyone realized it's one brand, and it's really an advantage to have an e-commerce business, and so we were folded back in. I then went to Urban Outfitters for a couple years and worked on building their e-commerce business. And in 2007, went to Sephora, where I had the ability to both sort of recreate a web business for them. It was the sort of second phase. They had a third-party outsourced web platform and not a centralized team working on e-commerce. And when I joined, the other mandate was to launch Beauty Insider, the loyalty program that is such a key part of the Sephora shopping experience today. And then as I was there for almost 8 years, we sort of came into mobile, and so we got to launch the first mobile experiences and social and build community on the site, and bring store digital technologies to the stores. So it was a really phenomenal period of time, and it was really fun to be at a category leader, so Sephora being kind of the mecca for women who love beauty, and a time when there was such transition going on in the bricks and mortar. So Sephora was a disruptor to the department stores, and then we sort of felt like when I came on, I said, I don't want anyone to be bigger in digital beauty than Sephora, so we really invested heavily in the digital side of the business as well. And so as I was on then became the chief marketing officer and was running kind of the store side as well as the digital side for Sephora. And I met a woman named Katrina Lake who founded Stitch Fix in her second year of business school. And it was about a year after she started the business, and one of her investors introduced us. And the idea and the concept of the business, while tiny at the time I met her, was very interesting to me, because it was kind of solving the problem that I always saw both at Nordstrom and a little bit at Sephora, which was that you click on, women's apparel, dresses, and everybody sees the same set of product in the same order. And I knew we were capturing all this data, and there was so much to be done with it, but we weren't really doing a lot with it. And it was V.1, so we had a lot of other things to figure out, from how do you get product up on the site to, how do you find new customers. And so the idea was super interesting to me, and I ended up joining her board in 2012 and watched the business grow very organically. There was no marketing dollars being spent other than a referral fee for customers who referred a friend who bought. And so in 2015, about 2.5 years ago, I joined full-time as the COO and watched the business grow to the public sort of information that we've shared is last year. At this time, we ended the business at the year at $730 million. $730 million, heading towards $1 billion. And we had been profitable for 3 years. So we were able to build a model that allowed us to kind of control our own destiny. We had raised $46 million. And those numbers, so if you think about a company that's 6 years old, has hit close to $1 billion and is profitable in the retail space, it's pretty unheard of. So it's quite a bit bigger than a lot of the other brands and e-commerce companies. There's a few that also reached that size and scale. And the experience sort of growing that quickly was a wild ride. And I'm there through the end of this month. And I'm going to go back to being an advisor, and I'm moving on to my next thing to be announced. But will remain very involved in the business and a big sort of believer in what is still to come for that business. It's a really unusual business. So I thought I would just spend a minute telling you a little bit about Stitch Fix so you had some context. Most of you probably know, so I won't go too detailed, and then sort of hop into lessons and have that conversation. So the business itself, I would say there are core parts of it. So you sign up for the service, and it's a profile of about 40 questions that you answer as a consumer, and then you can choose to get a fix on a one-off basis or sign up for a frequency that's just sent to you at whatever frequency you want. So there are a number of choices. And then what happens is all the information on you gets read by our sort of data science machine, and we automatically kind of match and score all the product in our inventory to the consumer. And we have 5 warehouses, and we carry the inventory. And so it's a combination of private label and market vendors and brands. Hopefully some of you in the room have started working with us as we just launched a contemporary side of the business. And then a stylist is assigned through an algorithm to the customer and gets the sort of set of product that's available and relevant to that customer based on all of the attributes that we have on that customer, and chooses the product for the customer, and the product is shipped in a box of 5 items. The customer doesn't know what she gets unless she peeks on her app before it arrives, and then tries it on at home and only pays for what she wants to keep and sends back whatever she doesn't. It's super seamless and easy, and it has been what I would call like a true product market fit. Consumers who like the service love the service. It works really well for them, and it really solves a problem in their life, which is they don't have time and that much interest in shopping, or they don't know what it is that they want to wear, or they just sort of want someone else to be sort of sprinkling in new things because they always buy the same navy and black, tops every time they go shopping, which is me. And so the business has grown both in the women's business, and then we launched men's last year, and we launched Plus this past spring, and then we just launched Contemporary in about a month ago. So the business is expanding, and there's lots of expansion plans ahead. So there's a lot of possibilities to do sort of more business with this kind of platform. We have about 80 data scientists in-house and about 100 plus engineers. And there are about 500 to 600 people corporate office, and 6,000 people when you factor in the stylists who are employees. So there's 3,500 employees who are stylists, and they work remotely, but they're part of the company. And then we have 5 warehouses, so we have employees in all of the warehouses. So that's the business, a really interesting one. I think I'm a little biased. One of the most interesting, really sort of new directions in what's going to happen in e-commerce. So hopefully you'll stay tuned and continue to watch the business. But having gone from more traditional businesses where I was sort of, my mandate was to build an e-commerce business and then help understand how digital is moving and changing and can impact the business. and doing that within a larger company, and then suddenly going to a much younger company, a startup, the journey was definitely really eye-opening. I would say the first thing that was the biggest shock to me was actually sitting out with everyone and not having an office. And I've talked to other people who have gone from sort of more traditional companies and offices to open seat floor plan. And some people seem to adapt really quickly. It definitely took me a little bit longer just because it was the physical space that I was used to operating in and thinking in. But I am a convert now and definitely believe that not just the energy, but also kind of the conversations that happen and the access and the sense of teamwork is really quite different. So I was recently had the chance to be in the WeWork main office in New York, and that is sort of next level of sort of the future workspace. But what's interesting is how different the sort of whole feel of the company is when you're in a physical sort of landscape that feels a little bit next gen. All right, so we're gonna hop into my lesson so I don't totally run out of time, and then hopefully we'll have a little time left for Q&A. So the first is this idea that there's a whole new nomenclature and set of tools. One of the first things that I experienced was I'm switching to a Mac, and I'm switching to everything in the Google suite. So there's no Outlook, and many of you are probably, if you're in smaller companies, already doing this, but the idea of enterprise licenses through Microsoft and all the tools that sort of are, have been traditionally in play, it's hard to move off of those. I was completely set up within 5 minutes. Everything was easy and accessible. I did have to get used to the Gmail interface, but I was happy to get rid of Yahoo Mail, which only worked about 50% of the time anyway for my personal address. So, the whole company uses, we use Slack to communicate, which is a communication tool that is real time. It's like, it was like AOL Messenger, I think is what it was called, or I can't remember, AOL Chat. So all of the tools are different. The nomenclature is different. So HR is called P&C, People and Culture. There's no, IT is the people who support the computers, not the people who are actually developing the code for the technology that we're using as a business. And the reality is that technology has come so far, even in the last 5 years, that the ability to work more off cloud-based technology that's easier to integrate and install and leverages APIs really changes kind of the whole nature of what can be done and the speed that you can do new things. The second lesson is kind of what is data science, and if everyone in sort of retail and beauty has sort of some data analysts, can you leverage those people to really be more data-centric as a company? And what I learned in my time on the board and then in-house at Stitch Fix is there's a whole other level of data science that most companies that have already existed and are trying to tack it onto their business aren't able to access. So one of the things that is really unique about Stitch Fix, and there are definitely other businesses that also work this way. I'm on the board of Redfin, and it's a real estate company that leverages data to kind of underlie all of its capabilities. All of the music services do this, Netflix does this. But it's basically starting with data as opposed to using data to analyze the business and then come up with ideas and then maybe do some targeting. So it's saying we're gonna create an algorithm and we're gonna let that algorithm tell us what the answer is. And so every customer and every product goes through this algorithm and gets matched. And we use data science, not just for matching consumers to product, but also for things like allocation. So when we originally set up, we have 5 warehouses. So we were set up for people to sort of determine which product goes to which distribution center. And now that's done through 100% machine. Even the planning function, how much do we need to buy for these things? We're developing our own tools using data science and algorithms to develop sort of a more machine learning approach to planning. When a customer comes in, we use an algorithm to match them to stylist. And so the whole business is based off of and sort of sits on top of data science, as opposed to kind of looking at it as a side thing where we're trying to analyze what the business is. And I think that I had not, I knew that sort of this idea of hiring a really talented data scientist. We hired early on a guy named Eric Colson, who's terrific, and he came from Netflix, and he built the algorithm behind Netflix. Was a really key move, not just because he actually saw how data science was applied and was able to early on build this muscle, but he also had the ability to attract a community of data scientists, because it's hard in a business to be appealing to someone who's grown up in sort of some form of science that is generally more sort of PhD academia focused, may not even have been used in a sort of commercial use. So we have people who were physicists and who were, I'm going to be insulting them by not remembering where they came from, but all forms of, I would say, academia in the data science realm. And now they're sort of using the same approach to looking at data and building algorithms that can be applied to our business. So it's fun because some of them knew nothing about apparel beforehand, and now they can tell you, every aspect of a garment. We also have started to use data science to help us actually create some private label product where it's sort of an AI-based garment. So it looks at all these facets of what the product, different products are doing, and because we get feedback on all of the products that we sell or put in a client's box, we actually know this one sort of, the fit does this, or the pattern is really liked here. And so we've built some unique product through that have higher success rates as a result than some of the other private label product that we have created. So it's been really interesting to think about all the ways to apply the data science. The third is that engineering is different from IT, and the one thing I would say here, because I talked a little bit about it in the first, is that as I said, IT in sort of a new company is really important, but it's more around infrastructure and supporting the equipment and hardware that we all use to do our jobs. And engineering is really the group that builds new products, digital products, and engineers who are not encumbered by legacy systems have the ability to truly create anything it is you could envision. And so I think from the business standpoint, it's much smarter to think about what is the experience I want to create and what would be game-changing for the customer, where are we stuck and what can we not address, and then working with the engineers to actually build that. And if they are trained sort of in the way multiple languages, they have the ability to leverage lots of different tools to be able to create, frankly, any experience you want, pretty much. So I think the mindset of how to work with engineering is really important when they're able to be partners in the thinking around the experience you want to create. Their level of engagement and their ingenuity really comes out. The fourth is that a lot of us wonder what we should build in-house and when we should use off-the-shelf software products. And one of the things that became very clear to me as we were making choices, both at Sephora and at Stitch Fix, is that there are great times to buy a product and there are other great times to build a product. And really the key point is that if it's a part of your business that's a differentiator, if it's sort of what you're in the business of doing, then you want to build it, because you cannot find off the shelf and really create sort of the unique capability that you want to do, and it's going to be a core part of your future, even more so in the future than it is today. Whereas if it's not core to your business and it's just something you need to do to support the business, then you can buy it off the shelf. And so, hopefully not have to customize it too much. I'd say an example of this is, for us, we use Zendesk, which is a customer service software that is not homegrown. But every aspect of the site experience and the stylist cockpit that we use for the stylist to work were all built from scratch, because those experiences are core to what we do. And personalization is all about what we do. And so we would never, for example, work with a third-party personalization software. And I think for other businesses, whatever it is that you do, whether it's product design and you need a better supply chain, or it's service related, and you need special touch points, I think that's where you decide when do we buy versus build. I think that the biggest thing I've learned, and as I've been out there talking with lots of companies, is that really the reality is legacy systems, legacy organizations, legacy thinking, and trying to protect old businesses will literally kill the big players that are here today. So you have to be willing to think differently. Probably a new slew of CEOs over the next, I would say 5 to 10 years who will come from different backgrounds and think quite differently and understand how to sort of be able to leverage technology and create customer experiences that may be quite different than what worked for them in the past are going to be a requirement. And figuring out how to sort of plug in technologies that can work around your legacy systems rather than building into them so that over time you can replace them and reduce dependency is essential. One of the things that we did at Sephora was in 2009, so just as really the iPhone became more broadly adopted and clearly highly functional, mid-year we got LVMH to invest in allowing us to build a mobile site and a mobile app, and we worked with a third party. Eventually we brought it in-house, but to get going and for speed, and we sort of worked around all of our systems, and we got an awesome mobile site built in about 4 months. And so we found the right partner. They were young and hungry and totally flexible and allowed us to do something that sort of didn't depend on all of the systems that would have taken us probably 2 years to do otherwise. So I think it's really important to have the insight and knowledge within the organization and how things work to be able to almost skip old layers and start fresh in certain places where actually the consumer experience is going to drive your business forward. The sixth is that anything is possible with 3 key ingredients. I think watching my time is up? Okay, I will speak really quickly for the rest. So, I think that one of the really amazing things about watching a business go from 0 to $1 billion in 6 years is you realize anything really is possible. And I've always been someone to kind of push the envelope and sort of say, we're going to figure out an answer to it. But when you're in an environment where you have both a great strategy, the right people, and the ability to execute, you really can do anything. And so I think that that mindset is critical to be able to continue to drive the future. Staying fast and nimble is hard even, as you are a young company, because really sort of the whole environment and the business and the size of the business changes probably every year when you're in a fast-moving environment, and it requires you to constantly be rethinking your structure, the way you're working, the way you're getting work done. Suddenly you look around and instead of 5 people in a meeting room, there's 20 people in a meeting room, and you have to do a timeout and you have to figure out how you work differently, and it is a constant, I think, requirement for all businesses. Amazon is an existential threat to all of us, unless you're Amazon. But what I would say is monopolies are bad. We all know that. The consumer experience would be really, really sad if Amazon were the only player. And Amazon is an inspirational monster, and one that I think obviously is very tricky for brands to think about how to play with. But I do think that because they're so good at sort of big things, there are lots of opportunities in the marketplace to find opportunities where they're not going to be focused or it's not part of their business model to serve customers. I think Amazon is not a threat to Stitch Fix. What we do is so unique and different, and it just wouldn't make sense for them to do it. And so I hope that there are many more businesses that continue to thrive and find opportunities to grow in spite of Amazon's continued growth and success. The second to last thing I would say is one thing to note that really struck me when I came to Stitch Fix and I looked at the business we're doing is that really when you look at all the data, half the population actually doesn't like to shop. So while we are all focused on creating amazing experiences and product for people who appreciate shopping and product, a lot of the population actually is overwhelmed, and as there's more opportunity and assortment and brands and stores, it gets even more overwhelming. And so one of the things that Stitch Fix has really been a big opportunity is that for the people that don't either know what they want to wear or don't feel confident in it, it's a huge opportunity, it's a huge market, and we're able to solve that problem. So I think it's an interesting one when you think about sort of retail as a service, and how you can continue to help customers who may not be the shopping lovers. And then finally, my last point is omni-channel may be a red herring. I think that term, which emerged a couple years ago, and certainly I've used in the past too, is one that unfortunately puts a focus on the two channels, the store and the web business. Sometimes we're also including mobile, puts the focus on making them similar. And while obviously things like pricing, you don't want to have different between channels, really the beauty of those different channels is they bring really different experiences, and customers go and use those channels for different reasons. And so I think that there has been a little bit of an over-focus in the industry on trying to make everything the same, as opposed to thinking about when you're using your phone, when you're using the site, when you're in the store, what are the best possible experiences in those moments, and how do you sort of continue to innovate and make those experiences even better. So those are some of the lessons I thought I would share. I don't know, do I have any time for questions? I do, okay, great. So a few minutes for questions if anyone has any.
Hi, so I'm in merchandising, and so we obviously own the P&L and the customer experience, and we have the engineers who kind of own the back end piece of it.
Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing
Sorry.
you.
So the engineering piece is kind of where my question is. So our engineers built our site, and it's their baby, but we need to tell them their baby is ugly, and we'd like to buy a new baby because it's just old, and it just needs to be updated, and they're very much, no, I want to build it, I want to continue to build it. So for us, we've been trying to say it's going to take years to get to kind of where we are today. So how do you get engineering more bought into the fact that we need to buy versus build?
I mean, you probably have to start with the person who influences the rest of the organization, and really, I would say, make the numbers talk so that that person feels invested in the success of sort of what it could do for the business. So I think it's in business in general, as we all know, it's all about building strong relationships with your partners in the company to be able to be effective. And so you have to be able to convince that person that it's going to move the business forward, it's going to drive more sales, they're going to benefit from it. And once you can get them on board with the business opportunity, then, and sort of help let them, I would say, be a part of thinking about how to do it in the most effective way, hopefully then that person can sort of get the rest of the engineering team behind it and excited about it. But I think it's all about sort of selling your ideas in at the right level.
You've had a very successful career so far, and I wonder if you don't mind sharing some personal business thoughts of, do you have any principles by which you judge how to use your time or allocate time or where to devote your personal resources?
It's a great question. I think that probably in my roles, about 30% of my time has been focused on hiring. So recruiting and getting to know talent in the market and hiring the right people is the number one way you're successful, because you can only do so much as a single human being. And so I've always put a really big emphasis on making sure that whatever the role I either have open or see coming down, I'm meeting candidates and finding talent. I think that I spend probably another third of my time just directly with my team. So spending time talking through where things are at and helping them problem solve. I mean, I think that I'm a big advocate of servant leadership. It's all about helping sort of the team figure out where to focus and how to use their time. And I would say I spend probably another 20% thinking about sort of really what's going to move the needle and making sure that it's really clear and the priorities, both the sort of strategy, the goals, and the steps to get there are really clearly outlined to the organization, and we're continuing to communicate and keep track of how we're doing against those goals. And then I probably spend sort of the last portion of my time holding meetings with sort of other people in industry and related industries. So I've always, when I was at Sephora, had the chance to meet tons of people who are doing startups and beauty brands and technology, because I think it's just really helpful to hear what's going on outside of your own company. It keeps you, smart and relevant and thinking about what else you could be doing. So I'd say that's probably a rough breakdown.
We have time for one more question.
Having come from retail and going into a startup, I'm curious to get your opinion on what you think retail stores are doing wrong or could do better.
I think they're doing a lot wrong. But I think they're going to stick around, those who can change. I think that the truth is that there's not as much traffic. There's not, and there's never going to be, because there's a whole other way to buy, and so you don't need to go to stores. And so the question is, what is the benefit of going into the store? What are you looking for, and do you have it when they go into the store? And I think it's a combination of having people in the store who truly are experts and passionate about what they're doing. So it's so depressing to walk into a store and there's the sales associates are either like don't have the time for you or don't know the product information. I mean, if you're going to walk into a place, I think that sort of in the olden days, we always just assumed it's just traffic and then we convert some portion of the people in stores. But every person that crosses your threshold is an opportunity, and that person should be treated as that. They should be serviced and they should be given whatever guidance and ideas, and you should be adding to sort of their knowledge when they come in, so that, when you go into a store and you try on a few things versus you go to a store and someone brings you all these ideas and they're helpful to you, obviously you have to read the sort of, the way the consumer is and if they want that. But if they want that, there's so much value there. And I would also say, in addition to being able to touch and feel the product, which is something that we all love to do, there is a human social element to shopping. And so what does that look like in the future? How do we bring energy to those stores, and how do we think about, I would say, the value of an economics of the store differently, so that in some cases they may be as much of a marketing vehicle to drive, bigger web business, and in other cases they may have the economics to support the four-wall business. And so ideally it can do both, but I think the evolution of some of the online to store businesses are interesting examples of how things can be done differently. The one thing I would sort of put a little bit of a pause on is the idea that you don't need inventory in store. You walk into a store, you want to be able to walk out with product. It's very unsatisfying, when you try and sort of say, oh, I can order for you online, and then you go through all the screens. You're kind of, as a consumer, like, yeah, I can order it online too. So I think that it's an interesting balance between holding inventory in store and sort of using the store as a showroom. And I'm excited to see, hopefully for the companies that are really willing to take risks and actually test concepts, so use their store in the same sort of A/B test format that we use online, to try out some new things and see what new experiences could look like and bring fun and energy. This weekend, by the way, in the New York Times, there was a column written by an MIT professor who lays out the future of the suburb. And if you didn't read it, you should look it up online. I wish I could remember his name. But he lays out how houses will work, how drones will deliver products, how cars will be sort of in a centralized place, how space is used. And it was one of the first examples I've seen of someone actually taking both space and technology and thinking about the future and pulling it all together and seeing how it might look. And it was a really great example of, I can see that happening. And so I think we need to, sort of almost leapfrog where we've been and think sort of from scratch. If you're creating a store today, what would it look like? How would you measure the results? And not be afraid to test some new radical things.
Thank you.
Thanks.